From EPAWA Weather Consulting, headquartered in North Whitehall, Pennsylvania, this is Weather Weeklies, an informative video of the ins and outs of weather that affect you most in the EPAWA coverage area. The thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are those of the forecaster alone and may not reflect those of the staff of EPAWA Weather Consulting LLC as a whole, nor its constituents. Now, without further ado, here is meteorologist Bobby Martrich with Weather Weeklies.
Good Sunday morning to you. Another edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, January 17th. In this particular video, I'm going to talk about the upcoming pattern shift that we're expecting. And I want you to stay away from the sensationalistic headlines. When I did the long range on Friday, I made note of that when I made the post for it on Facebook and my Twitter account. And it's getting a little out of hand with some of these descriptions of the polar vortex and brutal cold and whatever headline you want to attribute that to, but there's a lot of that out there, and there has been. Now, I did see some backtracking a little bit with some articles that are being circled out there in various media sources, but you just got to stay away from that kind of stuff here. And I'll give you the breakdown. We do expect a pattern shift, and I'll define that for you of what we're talking about going forward. Here is the long-range outlook from Friday, the long-range table, and we do have the slightly above average period that we're going to be expecting through about for the next couple of days, and then we're going to be kind of near average here between the 20th and 22nd. Then we see a pattern shift, but you see it's very time-limited. This is not a brutally cold air mass. I only have slightly below average temperatures that are listed in the long-range table, and that starts to moderate ever so slightly as we get into the first week of February, but it's still near to slightly below average at that point. Then I foresee a period that we're going to head to slightly above average through at least the middle of the month before we start to turn colder again late in the month. This can move around a little bit. It's going to depend on what the stratosphere does. There's some things going on in the stratosphere that may actually help us this time. This first one that didn't really help us too much as the primary vortex splits as a result of that warming over the poles made it to Europe and eastern Russia. There are some indications, at least from the longer range GFS ensemble, that the primary barotropic lobe will be over North America this time when we have the second one. So the second one is right in this kind of period here. But I think even if you don't have that benefit the way it's modeled currently for this period, I think you do turn cooler regardless during the second half of February for various reasons, tropical forcing being one of them. So we'll see how this plays out here, but I think this is not your last hurrah for winter, and this does not mean boatloads of snow either. We do have snow chances here listed. There are just kind of like some snow showery stuff here during the course of the week that really won't amount to too much, if anything at all. And then we look forward to our next storm signal. The first one we have listed here is the 25th, 26th. The models have now picked up on that. Second one is the 30th and 31st. The models are somewhat picking up on something being there, but it's not, the specifics of that range, of course, would be futile. So we're going to watch these next two time periods here that we have listed. When I do these outlooks, I don't use models in order to come up with these signals. These are global observational type things that are looking at what's happening well upstream that will affect things downstream. Observational, things that are actually occurring. This is why I was able to say that, hey, when everybody was touting this powder change, that I was saying, hey, it's not going to happen like the second week of January, like most were saying, or maybe even the middle of the month. I said, hey, that's too early. We're going to be around the 21st, 22nd, and guess what? That's what's happening. All right, and that's because we used global observations to do that. So for this month, we are above average right now. I think with the cooler period coming in toward the end of the month, we will average between +1 and +3 for the entire month, and that's going to be skewed higher because of the first 3 weeks of January generally being above average to this point. And we still have near average snowfall listed here, but it's going to be predicated on what happens these last 10 days of January here, because most areas didn't really see too much in terms of snowfall this month. But we do have slightly above average listed and continuing to list here for the month of February. Here's what average snowfall is across our region. You can see this is what normal is for these locations here for the month of January and February respectively. So we can expect this area, these areas here, some of these areas will receive at least normal snowfall if these signals work out the way we think they will. Again, these signals are not blockbuster storms, I don't think. I mean, could they be? Sure, but I wouldn't really bank on that right now. I think it's more like nickel and dime type stuff here. We might get like a 3 to 6 inch snowfall, 2 to 4. They add up. But I wouldn't go for the bigger storm threat because the pattern we're heading into is an overrunning pattern, and I'll explain that in a second here too. In February, this is going to be primarily during the second half of the month. Maybe the very first couple days of February you might have something, and then you wait a little bit when we get to that warmer period, and then the end of the month we start picking up again. So slightly above average we still have maintained for the month of February, and here's where we are year to date. So we're still green here, and we're still at or above normal at these locations here. The top 5, Atlantic City still hasn't seen anything but a trace, and they're behind here. But everywhere else, you are above, or Philadelphia is now dead on average through yesterday. So the 6.6 is where they should be for this time of year, and that was really from one storm. And the rest of these locations were primarily from that December storm, but you had some other nickel and dime stuff here, a little 1 inch here, 1.5 inches there, that kind of thing that added up to this. But they're still above average because of that. So year to date, we are still technically at or slightly above average, except for our coastal regions and far southeastern areas. So we're going to need some additional snowfall in order to keep on that pace to stay above. Otherwise, you're going to start dropping to near average or below even if that doesn't start to pick up here in the next 2 weeks. And this pattern shift that I'm talking about is going to last about 2 weeks. And this is what a pattern shift looks like. Okay, so we're generally too warm to snow here. We're in the 40s here starting off. Then we have these couple days here that are kind of like near average. But here is where this is your pattern change. This is it. This is not brutally cold, folks. This is not polar vortex, end of days, death to everybody kind of stuff that you see in these headlines. It's insane. But this is what it is. It is what it is. So this is Allentown. This is Allentown, Lehigh Valley International Airport. And you're kind of right around that freezing or just below freezing mark here, 30, 32-ish. That's not brutal cold. Is it colder than average? Absolutely. Average this time of year is 36 here at this location. If you go up, if I would to pull it up here for the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area, these highs are in the upper 20s. Going down to Philadelphia, temperatures are in the low to mid 30s. Okay, this is below average. Normal high here in Philadelphia is 40. Okay, this is definitely a pattern shift. It's just not, and it's consistent. These are more than a week straight here, and actually we're expecting this to go for about 2 weeks up until about the 5th or so of February. Then we start to see some moderation, but this is below average. So in terms of what a true definition of a pattern change is, which I'll give you in a second, this is a pattern change, and it's because of the changes to the 500 millibar anomalies, and I'll show you that here in a second too. Now to get to that, we're talking about the Pacific jet extension that is still raging from southern China all the way across to the northwest U.S. coast. But look at the end of the loop here. Look at the end of the loop here. I'm going to stop this. Okay. Notice there's a little bit of a void that comes in here. So you had this jet extension going all the way across the Pacific, right? Well, now you get this little bit of a void that comes in here that's going to allow some ridging to build in here because you no longer have that jet extension going all the way across. Okay. So that in that void, you have ridging that's allowed to build into the Gulf of Alaska. So that's going to change our EPO, which is our Eastern Pacific Oscillation. It's going to change that around a little bit. Okay, and that's going to give us some changes here in the next couple of weeks. So what does that mean? Well, we have as a result of that jet extension, we have low pressure that has been in the Gulf of Alaska persistently for the past couple of weeks, leading to our warm weather. But look what happens when that void goes away. You have this ridging now taking its place and building into Alaska. That ridging is key and instrumental to getting a cross-polar flow and getting some cold air into the United States that we have not seen thus far in January. Because all these lows that are out here were over here. Okay? So now you have that the relaxation of that jet extension. Ridging is allowed to build in place of those lows. And so they're all forced to the west here. You have ridging that builds into Alaska instead. And you get a cross-polar flow. Here's what it looks like if you want to look at it on a table. We're up here with positive EPO right now, and we're going to be heading negative here until about the middle. This goes into about the 3rd or 4th of February, and then it starts to rise to a positive EPO once again. So this is your period. This is your colder period. The blocking in the North Atlantic is going to maintain through the entire period just about. All right, and here's your warm period right here when the EPO is neutral and you have a NAO coming back up to neutral again, but then you see the second half of February it starts to dip down again, and this could be as a result of some stratospheric changes down the line. This is what it looks like for an Eastern Pacific oscillation. This is the ridging into the Gulf of Alaska, pushing into mild air into Alaska. So as a result of that, you get a cross-polar flow that brings the cold into the United States. Now, how far east does it get depends on how much snow cover you got on the ground. Well, we don't have snow cover, so it is going to moderate. The air mass is going to moderate as it moves eastward. And if I put this in motion here, this is what we're dealing with now, is slightly above average temperatures. You see the cold air start coming into the western U.S. and western Canada, and some of that bleeds eastward, but it's going to moderate as it does so. You don't get these really brutally cold temperatures. You get some cold temperatures here, and this is slightly below average for this time of year. You don't need slightly below average this time of year in order to get to the snow, because it's the coldest time of year climatologically speaking. But if you have colder than average temperatures, you don't need it to be brutal, and it's not going to be brutal. It is not going to be an invasion of the polar vortex. It is what it is, folks. So we're going to have some cold air coming in. These warmer temperatures that we've had under that Pacific influence over the last couple of weeks will subside, and we'll have colder air coming into our region, kind of like on this northwest to southeast axis here, kind of like this. But your coldest is going to be up here, okay? We're going to get some moderation of that air mass as it moves eastward. But this is an important quote I took that I put it purposely in the long-range outlook, because everybody seems to think that pattern change means like tons of snow coming. Snow is not a metric to define a pattern shift or pattern change. Pattern change refers to significant changes in the North American continent with regards to the 500 millibar height anomalies and the resultant change in temperature patterns. We are going to have that. Although snow chances and probabilities increase during this period, accumulated snowfall is not a metric to define any pattern shift or change. So does that mean we're not getting any snow? I don't think so. I think we get some. I just don't think it's going to be a blockbuster pattern here. This is like an overrunning pattern that we're going to have several chances every 3-4 days of a storm being in the vicinity. Does it mean every single one's going to hit? No. Does it mean everyone's going to be big? No. Could it just be snow showers and just minor accumulations or a wintry mix? Yeah, absolutely. But there are signals out there. This is what the overnight run of the European ensemble did for the next 2 weeks through the end of the month. This is through the 31st of January, okay? So it has, as a mean snowfall, it has some accumulations here. This is not a blockbuster pattern here, though. Can you get some snow here out of this? Sure, okay? And we'll add to your season totals. Is it a ton of snow? Doesn't look like it as I'm sitting here right now. I mean, you have overrunning events that could produce decent amounts of snow, and you can get some overrunning events that will give you more than just 3 to 6 inches of snow. You get somebody at 6 to 10, 6 to 12, whatever. I mean, it depends on the system and how it evolves. But this is the mean snowfall on the European ensemble that ran overnight for the next 2 weeks through the end of the month. Okay, so now don't pay attention to these specific amounts here. This is blending 50 different members together to get these numbers. So there's some that are more, there's some that are less. Okay, this is not an indication of exactly what you're going to see. It doesn't mean you're exactly going to see 6.3 inches at Philadelphia International Airport. It just means that the probability is going to be higher going forward. And we're doing long-range outlooks where they are probability based. Okay, and this is a probability right here. That's what this is, because we're looking at 50 different members blended together in a mean to give you an idea of what the pattern is going to be going forward. One of those such storm signals we have here, this is the storm signals going forward. We have a little bit of snow showers earlier in the week, and then this is the first of 2 storm signals that we have listed coming in here, right here. This is an overrunning system, and it could produce some accumulating snow across the region, and that would be in the 25th, 26th time frame. All right, and I think it's more so the 25th, which would be next Monday, not this Monday, the following Monday. So you got some time here to look at this, and this could just end up being a fart in the wind with time. It doesn't mean it's going to look like this. This could certainly change. There's another storm signal that comes in behind that. I wish I would have had this a little bit faster here so we can breeze through this, but we're coming into the 25th right. Here's the first signal right here, and that moves through the region, gives us some areas to the north snow, areas to the south rain. Okay, and then you have other signals that come in behind this that it's really not able to pick up on just yet, but right around toward the end of the month at our second signal there is something there too that the models are trying to pick up on. When you get past 5 days right now in this kind of pattern, it's kind of like a futile effort really to look at specifics and details, but this is the first stab that the GFS has here for that overrunning system here on the 25th. And you can see it's going to be track dependent. Low pressure moves off to our south of the Mason-Dixon. North of that area, you have a swath of snow. Could be significant, could be minor. All right, you have mixing in the middle, and then you have rain further south. It's all going to be track dependent. If this track's a little bit further south, and the blocking is a little bit stronger to force out a little bit further south, your snow gets all the way down into the areas that didn't receive as much snow so far this year. If it ends up being a little weaker, that block ends up being a little bit weaker, this could end up a little bit further north and bring more rain to everybody. So this is, the storm signal is there, and this is probably not exactly how it's going to evolve, considering we're looking at a forecast here for 8-9 days from now. Okay, so this is going to change a lot, all right, over the next week or so. Don't get hung up on individual runs and saying, oh, well, it had a big storm last run 6 hours later, now it has nothing. You're going to have that back and forth stuff. The signal is still there, though. Again, we're using probability signals here. This is one of the signals. We have another one at the end of the month that we'll deal with, and probably another one in early February before we head into that milder pattern. It's kind of like an every 3 to 4 days type of thing. But why do I think we're heading in that milder pattern? Well, we're going to have changes to the Madden-Julian oscillation that's going to keep us in a circle of death here, which we are now in this morning, for the majority of the next 2 weeks. Once we get toward the end of the month, it might start sneaking into phase 6 or phase 7 here. Well, this time of year, phase 6 is very warm. Phase 7 is mildly warm, so it's not really the best pattern as far as tropical forcing is concerned. So when we get into that, there's a little bit of a lag time, a couple days here for us to see the sensible effects, at least a week or so. So we will turn milder, I think, once we head into the second week, at least, of February. How long that lasts is going to be predicated on the stratospheric polar vortex. This is the stratospheric heights at 10 millibars. So we had a strong stratospheric warming episode over the polar regions, and we have 2 daughter vortexes. These are barotropic lobes, and you see nothing over the North American continent. So we did not really benefit from the brutal cold that was in the headlines. Okay. Europe did. They got a heck of a lot of snow over there, and it's definitely a great winter for them so far. And also Eastern Russia, Siberia, that area, so they saw a lot of snow. So you see the displacement here benefited those areas, not so much North America. As we go through time here, the GFS ensemble is suggesting we're going to have another warming episode over the polar regions, and the primary barotropic lobe will end up over North America this time. This is early February this takes place, all right? Late January, early February. If this is correct, again, it's about a 2-week lag or so. That would put us on track for the second half of February, heading into early March at least, to see some colder and snowier conditions come back, all right? So this is cyclical. It's going to happen all winter long. You're going to go up and down. I know the pattern change that is not what maybe many thought it would be. It's not brutal cold and snow lasting for months at a time. It goes up and down, and we're going to have that up period where it turns more warmer up through about the middle of February, maybe last into the couple days into the second half of February. But we do see some changes down the line that could get us turning colder. If not from this, it might be from tropical forcing instead. So there's a lot of different factors going into it. But observationally speaking, I think we will be heading toward a cooler second half of February and early March. That's at the end of my comfort range of that 5 to 6 week lead that I do every single Friday. So when you get further out in time, less confidence, okay? Can this change? Absolutely. Absolutely. Is it a guarantee we're going to turn colder end of February, early March? No, not at all. But it's looking like if this were to evolve in this manner, we would be. Okay, or if tropical forcing continues into phase 8, phase 1, we have a good chance then. Okay, so there's a lot of different factors go into it. I just think probability based, we should head colder as we head toward the end of February, heading into early March again, after we have this 2-week period here of a break. So just to summarize here, we're likely heading into cooler than average period for the last 10 days of January and early February, but this will not be a brutally cold pattern. Snow chances will increase, but there are no big storm guarantees. I think you'll have several chances. Every 3-4 days, you'll have a chance of a storm in the vicinity. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to hit directly either. Might track a little bit too far north where you might get rain. I doubt that. I mean, it's probably the lowest chance probability. It's more likely going to be wintry, but these might not be big storms. It could just be nickel and dime type stuff that just adds up, okay? every 3-4 days. So you have a shot. And that's going to go through the first couple of days of February. Moderation will likely occur at the very end of February, week 1. So the end of the first week of February through at least the middle of the month. It might extend a little bit past that, but I do think we're going to turn cooler as we head into the second half of February into early March. And we are monitoring the stratosphere for sensible weather changes further into February. Less certain with that as far as confidence goes. So we'll continue to follow this, but just keep your expectations low. That's the biggest takeaway, is that, you know, if we wind up getting a big storm, great. If you're a snow lover, you're going to love that. But just don't expect that we're going to have like a big blizzard. It's not a blizzard type pattern. I mean, you get some decent snows out of overrunning sometimes, but it's not a guarantee. It could just be like a little weak system that just gives you snow showers, and that's it. Or a mix, or depending on the track and how intense it is. So just keep your expectations kind of low over the next couple of weeks here, and don't expect that we're going to be brutally cold. I realize cold is objective, and to some people 30 is very cold. I don't see that as being a headline grabber, really. If it's going to be highs in the teens and lows and below zero, you know, that's probably a little bit more, you know, that would be a little more relative to the kind of headlines I've seen. But just stay away from that sensationalistic stuff. I'll continue to give these breakdowns on a week-to-week basis, and we'll see where we are again next week. I'm EPAWA meteorologist Bobby Marchis. That is this edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, January 17th. Join us again next week on the 24th, and maybe we'll have a storm signal to talk about, and a little bit more. That storm signal might come to fruition around the 25th. We might be talking about that as the headline. We'll see how that works out. No guarantees, but at least a couple signals are there in the pipeline. Take care.